Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Allie's Book Nook. Today I'm going to share with you my spoiler-free reviews of the 13 books that I got through in April 2026. So April was a really great reading month. I participated in a reading challenge called the Yellow Book Road, and that was put on by Lauren and Ben Young from Youngs and the Restless, as well as several other booktubers. I did do a separate video where I showed my TBR for April based on the Yellow Book Road challenge. And basically there were 6 characters to the Yellow Book Road. You had to read one reading prompt from each character. Each character had up to 3 reading prompts, but you only had to pick one from each. So 6 books to complete the challenge. I did complete the challenge as well as read some additional books. There were a couple books that I picked out for the challenge that I didn't end up reading. I switched them out for other books, and that's okay. But that was really fun, and April was the first month that I've really had like a dedicated TBR going into the month because of that, and it was good. I feel like it kept me on track. So a couple quick stats before we get into the books. As I said, I read 13 books, which was 4,968 pages. One of them was ebook and audio. 10 were paper and audio. And one was only audio and one was only paper. So my average time to finish a book was 6 days. 100% of the books I read were fiction. And my top 5 genres, with some crossover, of course, were thriller, horror, mystery, literary, and historical. The average rating I gave during April is 3.81 stars. And I am at, as of the end of April, 50 books for the year, which is halfway to my goal of 100 books. So at this rate, I'm actually due to hit my goal in August, which is amazing. Pretty excited about that. But yeah, so my favorite book, okay, I'll just tell you this now, but I'll get into more detail when I talk about them. My favorite book of the month was Hairpin Bridge by Taylor Adams, and my least favorite book was A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. So let's dive in order that I read them. The first book here, I actually don't have any notes on because this is a book that I had just been reading with my kids, paper copy only, The One and Only Ivan. I won't talk a whole lot about this, but this is a kid's book. It is a series. This is the first book, and it's about this. It's based on a true story of this silverback gorilla named Ivan who lived in a mall in, I think it was the 90s, maybe. He lived in a mall as like an attraction. And then in real life, it follows the story pretty closely in terms of National Geographic did a story on him and it brought spotlight to it. People protested his living conditions and he was able to go live in a zoo with other gorillas. So it was actually really heartwarming. You get to meet other characters that live at the mall with him, other animals, and some of the other stories are their stories, but I actually really enjoyed it. This is actually written by Catherine Applegate. And back when I was a kid in the 90s, she wrote a whole bunch of books called Animorphs, I think. And it was about I think there was some kind of alien invasion, but kids would morph into different animals. It was kind of like a sci-fi series, and there was a bunch of them. But now she's written these books more recently, and yeah, this was really good. They did also do a movie adaptation of it. So as an adult, obviously I'm not going to give it 5 stars, but I would say it was a solid 4. I still really enjoyed it. And my kids loved it as well. Short sections, I guess they're chapters, they're not numbered, but we do have some illustrations, so it was good. I recommend it if you do have kids that are middle grade, maybe. I read this with my first grader, my third grader, but my first grader is pretty advanced in her reading level. I would say this is like anywhere from first to maybe 6th grade, 7th grade. I don't know. I enjoyed it as an adult, so yeah, The One and Only Ivan. Okay, so now to my books that I have notes on. My first book is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. And check out this edition with the sprayed edges. Isn't that beautiful? It says Sisters, Strangers, Survivors. So I actually got this book at TJ Maxx for like $8 or something. I was super excited when I saw it there. Because yeah, I'm a sucker for sprayed edges. So this book did fulfill one of the prompts for the Yellow Book Road Challenge. And that was, I guess I didn't write who was the wizard, but let me see. I have it here on my other notes. Sarah's Nightstand. So I encourage you to check out all of these other booktubers who participated in this Yellow Book Road Challenge, but it was Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand, and she had 3 prompts for the wizard, and the one that I used for this is something that had a book with a cover that contains a jewel, a gem, or a medal on the cover. So because of that necklace there, I thought that was a perfect fit. So yeah, Pretty Girls, Karen Slaughter. I started this on actually March 31st, and I finished it on April 4th. This is published by William Morrow in 2015, so it is 11 years old now, but it's still pretty popular, I feel like. It's a thriller, and like I said, it was $7.99 from TJ Maxx and then free to listen to through Libby, through my library. Main characters or subject, I would say unsolved missing person and family. So as it says, sisters, strangers, survivors, there is a sister bond and a mother-daughter bond that is part of the plot in here. So basically this book is about, there's Claire. I'm just reading this from the back. A glamorous trophy wife of an Atlanta millionaire. There's Lydia, a single mother dating an ex-con who struggles to make ends meet. And Julia, the sister whose devastating disappearance more than 2 decades earlier shattered their family. So this girl disappears, I don't know, like they said, 2 decades ago. I think it was in the 70s in this book. I think the book, well, maybe not. I don't know. It's been a while since I read this, but she disappeared like 20 years prior, and it really affected her family because there was no answers, no closure. So Claire, one of her sisters, modern day, she's out on a date with her husband in the beginning of the book, and he is unalived. And when that happens, it sets into motion a whole series of events that leads Claire and her estranged living sister to go down the path to try to find out some answers to what happened to their sister, because Claire finds out some really messed up dark stuff about her husband, and they think that that could be linked to their missing sister. And everyone says this book is really dark, check your trigger warnings, and yeah, it is. Yeah, there's gonna be some scenes that are just like really disturbing in this book. So yeah, check your trigger warnings. I will say that this book, so I gave it a 3.75 overall. I didn't love it as much as most people I think do, but it was fine. The chapters were really long, and I didn't like that. I didn't love it as much as I thought. Thought it was kind of drawn out. It was 394 pages and 20 hours on audio if you listen to it at 1.0. Now, I usually listen to my audiobooks at average like 2.0, 1.75 to 2, but still, that's a long book. I think Karen Slaughter, her books are kind of known for being long-winded. This was the second book of hers I read. The other book I read was False Witness, and I did like this better than False Witness. I will read more of her books. I do own her book, The Good Daughter. I will be reading that. And then I don't know that I want to commit to the Will Trent series. Also, her newest book that came out recently is the first book in a new series. So anyway, yeah, this is a thriller, mystery, dark book. And I gave it, like I said, 3.75 overall. And for quality of writing and plot, and strength of characters, 3.5. I feel like she could have trimmed this down a little bit. But that's my thoughts on Pretty Girl and pretty covers. Okay. The next book that I read was also part of the Yellow Book Road Challenge, and that was Fairy Tale by Stephen King. And I actually really liked this book, and this was a chunk of a book. So, their Yellow Book Road, the Cowardly Lion, who was, I think that was Lauren and Ben's character. Yeah, Young's and the Restless. Their character was Cowardly Lion, and they had 3 prompts, and the one I chose was an animal on the cover or an animal that's a character in the book. So you can see here on the cover, there is a dog and a boy that are going down into a staircase. Almost kind of looks like a well or like a dragon eye or something, but it's a spiraling staircase, and the dog there is named Radar. And so he is on the cover, and he's a pretty significant character in this book, and I loved Radar. I loved meeting him. It was so fun. So I started this book on April 4th, and I finished it on April 10th because, yeah, it is a bigger book. It was written by Stephen King and published by Scribner and Simon & Schuster in 2022. I would not call this a horror book. I know everyone says Stephen King is horror, and that's probably where you would find this book in most bookstores, but this is not a horror book. This is, I called it mystic realism or fantasy. Not heavy fantasy, but it's Stephen King's take on fairy tales. So, yeah, it's not horror. It's a little different than his typical writings. So I got this from the Easter Bunny. Who may have been in collaboration with Walmart that year. This was a couple years ago, I think, well, no, 2025. And it was kind of, if you were to purchase it at Walmart, it'd be kind of expensive for $26.94, so $27. And then I listened to it free through Libby. It did take a long time to come available on my Libby holds. So the main characters or subjects is, there's a character named Charlie Reed, and Radar, of course, the dog, and they visit a fairy tale land. So this book is 598 pages, 24 hours on audio, so even longer than Pretty Girls. And yeah, this is about a kid who's like 17, and he's named Charlie Reed. And something happens, and he ends up befriending this old man who has this dog named Radar. And something happens to the old man, and Charlie ends up having to take care of Radar and the house and stuff. And he, as the old man is on his deathbed, he tells Charlie about this portal to this fairy tale land that's in his shed. And so, Radar's getting really old. She's such a good girl, but she's getting old. She has like arthritis and stuff. And so part of, in Fairy Tale Land, there's a part of it where you can go where it kind of revives your youth. And so, he wants to take Radar there one more time to help her with her arthritis and stuff, and, help her feel like a younger dog again. So, as he goes into this fairy tale land, there are a lot of different characters that he meets, and a lot of them are kind of cliche, like fairy tale stuff, like you would expect. Like he doesn't exactly meet, say, Rumpelstiltskin, for example, but maybe a character that resembles that character. And he will even say, oh, this is kind of like, this and that fairy tale. And so that was kind of the point, I think, of this book and the journey that he took. And I actually really liked that. I really enjoyed this book overall. It was a little drawn out in some parts. There was a scene in here that was kind of action-y. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the Hunger Games, actually, and that was too drawn out. I usually don't like a lot of action in my books, and that part I feel like could have been trimmed, but maybe that's just me. One thing I really thought was cool about the audiobook is there is a short part in there that is actually narrated by Stephen King. So we have the audiobook narrator, but then there is like a couple chapters where after the old man passes away, Charlie finds these tapes that the old man made for him before he died. And Charlie listens to the tapes, and the voice on the tapes is Stephen King. And so I thought that was a fun surprise. I just really liked that part. So there was some stuff towards the end, how it all wrapped up, that I felt was like kind of anticlimactic. I don't know. It could have maybe been more creative with the way that everything came together in the end. I thought, like I said, it was just, I don't know, not very original, but the fairy tale references, they got to be a little cliche at times, but I think they were definitely intentional in there. And I would recommend this book. It's not your typical Stephen King book, but I really enjoyed it and I would recommend it. So I gave this 4.5 stars overall. For quality writing, 4.75. Strength of characters, 4.5. Plot, 4.5. And Radar herself gets 5 stars. I loved Radar. So overall, 4.5. Solid read. Solid in more ways than one. But yes, I do recommend this. Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Okay. The next book I don't have in front of me, and I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. I already said it was my least favorite book of the month, and that was A Gentleman in Moscow. I read that for my library book club, so I did have to return it. But yeah, I started it on 4/11 and finished it on 4/15. This was written by Amor Towles in 2016. I always thought it was an older book, but it's only 10 years old. It was published by Penguin Books, and I would call it historical fiction. So it was free through my book club as well as through Libby. I did the audio as well. It's 462 pages or 19 hours at 1.0 speed. So another like bigger book. The main characters are Count Alexander Rostov, and it's kind of like a Russian history would be a subject that takes place from the 1920s through the 1950s. And you guys, I'm sorry. I think I'm just in the minority here because I had such high hopes for this book, and I know a lot of people really loved it. And Chris from Wax Books and Whimsy, we love a lot of the same books, and she loves this book, and especially the author's other book, Lincoln Highway. But this just wasn't for me. I thought it was really boring and drawn out, and maybe I'm just too like lowbrow to like appreciate it, but it was not for me. There was a map at the beginning, and that got me excited because I love when there's a map at the beginning of books, but I didn't feel like it was really needed. It's about this guy that in Russia, he is put on house arrest for like 20 years in this hotel. So he lives in this hotel for 20 years, and it's about his life in there and the characters that he interacts with during the time. So there's like several people that come in and out of his life or stay in his life throughout the story. And I really don't want to give too much away because there's not a lot going on in the story. I think a lot of people appreciate it for the prose and just how they feel like the author can really take you into the book. I did like it better reading it than listening to it on audio, but yeah, I just felt it was really flat and I did not care for it. I did notice the chapters are unnumbered, but every chapter title starts with the letter A. It's a word that starts with the letter A. So that was kind of interesting little thing the author did. But yeah, I'm in the minority with my thoughts. I was disappointed in it and it was boring and I didn't like it. Sorry, but that is what it is. So I gave it a 2.0 overall for quality writing overall, and then plot and strength of characters 1.75. If I wasn't reading this for my book club, I probably would have DNF'd it. It just wasn't for me. But a lot of people in the book club and online and everything really, really loved it. This guy in the book club was reading quotes that really touched him in the story. And so, like I said, maybe I'm just like, I don't really read those kind of books a lot. And maybe I'm just like missing the point or too out of it to like really appreciate it. But yeah, not for me. That's okay. Okay, so moving on. Thankfully, my next book was another book from the Yellow Book Road Challenge. And I kind of switched places with where this was going to be on the challenge, but That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. So originally I was going to have this book be the Yellow Book Road Challenge for a book that was a hyped book or a bestseller, but I did change it. I did a different book for that. So this one I did The Wicked Witch, which is Books and Beaches, Amber's channel, Books and Beaches. And the prompt was a book with a green cover. So there's quite a bit of green on here, well, on the front. So that's the prompt I did for this. And I liked this book a lot. I started it. This was a book, very fast paced. I read it in the same day. I started it on April 15th and I ended it later in the day on April 15th. So written by Megan Lally, published by Source Books in 2024. And this is a thriller, and it is considered a YA thriller. Usually not big on YA, necessarily. I know there is okay, I shouldn't say that. It's not my go-to, but there are some great YA books out there. The Miss Peregrine series is like one of my favorite series. But yeah, this is technically a YA thriller. I bought it new on Amazon on a sale one time for $8.73, and I did purchase this on Audible. I think I paid $5.99 on Audible on a sale. So one of the main tropes in here is amnesia. I love an amnesia trope, and a possible kidnapping. So this book is 296 pages, 9 hours on audio, but it was 4.5 hours for me at 2.0 speed. Like I said, it's a young adult book, but it had a lot of swearing and more than was needed. This isn't necessarily a book I would want my teen to read. It's my first Megan Lally read. I would be open to reading more of hers. From what I've heard, I think this one is probably, a lot of people think this is her strongest book, but I would be open to her other books. I did have dual narrators in the audio. And yeah, the plot did read a lot like YA, but it wasn't bad. It was a quick, easy read, short chapters. I read it in 12 hours, usually while I was doing other stuff. I guess part, but not all of the ending. There were a few kind of stretches, possibly even plot holes, but it was good. It was a good book to get you out of a slump. Yeah, this is a very fast-paced book if you're in a reading slump. Like after reading Gentleman in Moscow, this was a good one to come back to. In my jam, which is thrillers. And this is a book about a girl named, well, what is her name? She doesn't know her name. She basically wakes up on the side of the road and she doesn't remember anything or how she got there. And the police don't know where she came from, but this guy comes into the police station and he says that he's the father. That's his daughter. So he takes her, he convinces them, it seems pretty solid. He shows them documentation and stuff, takes her back to his cabin. And she starts to question some things. She doesn't really have any memory of anything, who she is or anything, but memory does start slowly coming back. But also there's just some weird things about how it's very isolated. He seems to be isolating her intentionally in this cabin. And we also have a dual timeline of a kid named Drew who is accused of murdering his girlfriend, a high school kid accused of murdering his girlfriend. Or maybe popular opinion is that he accused murdered his girlfriend. And it's kind of implied, like, is that the same girl that is having amnesia? What is going on? And so Drew and his friends like try to figure out what's going on with his missing girlfriend that people think he killed. And she's trying to figure out what's going on here. And yeah, it's really good. Like I said, maybe not the most sophisticated plot. In some places it was like, really, but I really enjoyed this. Read it in a day, got me out of a reading slump. I wouldn't say I was in a reading slump, but got me out of the disappointing mood I was in after Gentleman in Moscow. So I would recommend this. I gave it 4.25 stars overall. 4.5 for quality of writing because it was really easy to read and fast paced. Strength of characters 4 and plot 4.5. That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. The next book that I read was also a book for part of the Yellow Book Road Challenge, and that is The Quarry Girls by Jess Lowry. Yeah, Lowry. Yes, Quarry Girls. So, this fulfilled the Yellow Book Road Challenge of The Scarecrow, which is Lindsay's Little Library, and it was to read a nonfiction or historical fiction based on a true event. So this is actually, it is loosely based on true event, but not as much as I was under the assumption it would be. So this was, I read it from 416 to 417, published by Thomas and Mercer in 2022. It's supposed to be a true crime thriller or historical fiction, but I would use that very loosely. I got it on Amazon for $8.99 and I don't know, less than $10 on Audible. Side note, I have canceled my Kindle Unlimited subscription and I'm going to cancel my Audible. I recently gained access to a lot more books through Hoopla and whatnot, and I'm really, really excited about that. So I have several books in my Audible that I've already purchased that I get to keep, but I won't be purchasing anymore anytime soon. So anyway, main characters are subject based on a real unsolved mysteries in St. Cloud, Minnesota. So that's what it, okay, the author grew up in St. Cloud, Minnesota area in the 1970s, and there was one or more serial killers on the loose at that time. Active, I should say, and committing these crimes that were unsolved. And so there was a lot of unease in the community. People, the kids kind of grew up like being aware of these dangers and watching for stuff, all that kind of stuff. And the author has a note in the beginning of the book talking about her experience about it, which really made me think that this book is going to be more about that situation. So author's note, she defines what a serial killer is according to the FBI, and how they kind of came about. Serial killers really came into culture like in the 1970s after the Vietnam War era. She goes into some historical stuff of some specific serial killers. And then we get into the story, which starts in 1977 and takes place, like I said, near where she grew up. But it doesn't really, I thought it would be much more like serial killer based. And while that's part of the plot, there's a lot more other stuff that play a bigger piece in it. So it's about these girls growing up in the 70s in that area. And it says, Heather and Brenda have a secret, something they saw in the dark, something they can't forget. They've decided to never tell a soul, but their vow is tested when their friend disappears, the second girl to vanish in a week, and yet the authorities are reluctant to investigate. So, you know, kind of like in the last book, these teenagers decide to look into it, take matters in their own hands and try to find some answers. And they come across some dark stuff that's happening in their community. And don't really want to get into too much, but yeah. Um, this book was okay. I wanted more like serial killer stuff based on the author's note and her talking about real serial killers, and it didn't have that, but it did have kind of a sense. I had like a sense of unease the whole time I was reading it. And it was, she did a good job with the atmosphere. So let's see, what did I put for my notes here? 307 pages, 10 hours on audio. My first book by her. The chapters in the book had sub-chapters, and so it didn't align with the audio table of contents, and that made it harder to do in tandem and go back and forth between the two, which is what I like to do. But at least the chapters were short. There were 57 chapters in this book. So, it was a dark, weighty atmosphere. The atmosphere reminded me a little bit of Pretty Girls, and actually also a little bit of, there's a book that I didn't like called Dark Places, or no, Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. I didn't like that book, but just the atmosphere of the small town, that was, I think, more in the South, kind of reminded me of this, just kind of like a smothering atmosphere. Even though they're totally different books. I might read more of hers in the future. It was quick. It was mostly fast paced, but I said till near the end. So I guess it did slow down there at the end. I gave this 4 stars overall, 3.75 for writing quality, strength of characters 4, and plot 3.75. Honestly, I don't know that I'm going to keep this. I think I might unhaul it. I have a lot of books. I'm trying to go through them and only keep the ones I really love. I did not dislike this book, but I also didn't love it. So, I would say this is more of like teenage girls trying to solve a crime or more and coming of age during that summer, more so than like historical fiction based on real serial killers, which is what I thought it would be. So yeah, it was fine. I liked it enough, but like I said, I think I'm gonna unhaul it and let someone else enjoy it, because a lot of people have raved about that book online. So anyway, the next book was, I'm sad to say this, but my second worst book of the month, because I hated the ending of it. And that is My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. So this book, I ended up, for the Yellow Book Road Challenge, I was going to do, That's Not My Name as a, like, hyped up bestseller book. I changed that to green, and I did this for the hyped up bestseller book. So, because I've heard this book in a lot of hype. This is a newly released book this year. And that was Glenda from Bookish Blonde, Jen Bookish Blonde. That was her challenge for a hyped up or bestseller book. But I started this on April 17th and I finished it on April 20th. This is written by Alice Feeney, published by Flatiron Books. Actually, it was published in 2025. I thought it came out early this year, but maybe it was late last year. It's a psychological thriller. And I actually did buy this book new, $15 on Amazon. And then I listened to the audio free through YouTube, which was kind of tough to do in tandem because it's all like one long YouTube video that you have to, pause. And if you get out of the app, try to find your way back again and stuff. But I ended up getting this book new because I really wanted to read it. I've heard great things. And a friend of mine, my reading buddy, she asked if I wanted to read this with her. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. It's a book I've been wanting to read. I've read several Alice Feeney books and I have enjoyed them. This is 307 pages, 9 hours on audio. And the audio, it did have some sound effects, which somewhat added to the story, like the sound of her running or waves on the beach, but it was also a little distracting at the same time. So before I get into my notes on it, I'll kind of tell you what it's about. This is about a lady named Eden Fox, and her husband recently moved to this new house, which, by the way, I love this cover. Look at the key. There's a woman's silhouette in the keyhole as well as on the teeth of the key. It's a side profile of a woman, and just like the ocean at night. Yeah. So they move into this oceanfront house, small community, her and her husband, and shortly thereafter she goes out on a jog. She comes home. Someone else answers a door, and it's a lady who looks a lot like her. And she's like, "Who are you?" And the lady's like, "I'm Eden Fox." And the jogger's like, "No, I'm Eden Fox." And she's like, "What are you talking about? I'm Eden Fox." And the husband comes to the door and he's like, "This is my wife that answered the door. I don't know who you are, jogger lady." And you're just like, what is going on? And literally, like, pretty much the whole book, you're like, what is going on? Who are these people? And I actually really enjoyed that. I thought it was cool. My friend and I were texting each other the whole time, like, what in the world? Like, what is going on? But unfortunately, the ending I did not like at all. And it actually ruined the book for me. I'm not going to give it away. This is a spoiler for review, but there's a couple other thriller books that I've seen do this type of ending to explain things. I'm not going to say the names of those books because it might give away this one, but I did not like that. It really irritated me, and that's kind of how I felt about this. Like, it didn't even make sense. It was like, what? No. Okay, so this is my 4th Alice Feeney book, and I will read more of hers. This was because the other 3 I liked well enough. This one I would, but the other ones were good. I think Beautiful Ugly has been my favorite. This book had multiple POVs and short chapters. It was a quick, easy read. It was fun and engaging until the twist at the end. But yeah, it was a fun book to read with someone along the way to kind of, we were bouncing ideas off each other, and our theories were not correct, but we were like really trying to figure out some wild theories to explain what was going on in this book. It could be a good book to read with a book club because of that too. But yeah, I just really hated the twist at the end. I am not going to say why again, but yeah. And it just felt like towards the end there was a lot of coincidences that made it seem a little far-fetched. So because of the ending, it dipped the rating down. I felt like this was going to be a 5-star read. By the end, it was a 3-star. And that's probably being generous. The only reason it's not a lower rating is because I really enjoyed my experience until I got to the end. So quality of writing was a 3, strength of characters a 3, plot a 2.5 because of the ending. But overall, I gave it a 3. Now, I know I sound rather negative about this, so don't let that sway you because a lot of people really like this book, and I've heard a lot of great things about it. So maybe it's just me. Yeah, but this was not for me, and I am gonna unhaul this book. Yeah, but it does have a cool cover, like I said. And it kept me entertained until it made me mad. Okay, so the next book I have is also for the challenge, Yellow Book Road Challenge, and that is Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. So the challenge for this was The Tin Man, which is Rhonda Holder, and it's a book with heart, emotions, healing, transformation. And that was actually like this is a perfect book for that prompt. It also hit my book bingo. I have a book bingo going where my friend made it for me of 100 spaces. And there is a prompt in there for a historical event in Europe. I use this because this talks about World War II in Russia. So this was written by Kristen Hanna, published by St. Martin's Griffin in 2010. It's a historical fiction. I paid $2 for this at Goodwill. And when I consumed this, I also had Kindle Unlimited and Audible. So it's one of those books, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can listen to it free on Audible and listen and read. So I did it through Audible that way. So I would say the main characters or subjects are grief, unresolved trauma, mother-daughter connection, and Russia and World War II. This book is 394 pages, 14 and a half hours on audio. It's not Kristen Hanna's, she has one narrator, Julie Whalen, that narrates a lot of her books. This was not her. This was narrated by a gal named Susan Erickson. But I thought she did a really great job because one of the characters is Russian, and she does a great job with the Russian accent. So basically, in this book, we have a character in modern time when this was written, so 2010-ish. And she grew up with a mother that was always very cold and distant. Her mother immigrated from Russia and married her father, and her mother's just always been really cold towards her children. And so this lady is an adult now, and she's dealing with stuff in her marriage and her becoming an empty nester and all this. And then something happens with her dad, and he really wants her mom to like open up to her kids. And so she starts telling them this Russian fairy tale, which as she's doing that, she's also like explaining more of her life in Russia during World War II. And if you've ever read any Kristen Hanna books, you know that they are heart-wrenching, and especially like, you know, think of The Nightingale taking place in World War II, or the women during the Vietnam War, and how just like the stories of these survivors and everything that they had to go through is just brutal. So I actually really liked that part of the story. But the stuff in modern day, like as they go about their day-to-day business and she's trying to run her business and like all this, like that stuff was kind of boring to me. I would have liked to actually, I don't even, if maybe she could have wrote this book without that and just taking place in Russia in World War II. I don't know, but I could have used less of that and more of the heart of the story to me, which was I think this was it Stalingrad, Leningrad formerly, and Leningrad, yeah. And it's funny because I read this in the same month that I read Gentleman in Moscow, which also takes place in Russia, Soviet Union, Leningrad, which is it St. Petersburg now? It's not called Leningrad anymore, but my connection to the time period and all of that resonated so much more for me in this book than it did in A Gentleman in Moscow. I really enjoyed this book. It wasn't my favorite Kristen Hanna book. My favorite is Great Alone, and probably always will be. I'd say this is my 5th book of hers. So order would probably be Great Alone, The Women, The Nightingale, The Four Winds, and then this. Well, this is pretty closely tied with The Four Winds. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So it did start off a little slow in the contemporary times till we got into the dual timeline there. I liked the setting in Russia much more. It was just really emotional talking about the toll that the war took on citizens there. And her mom found redemption in the book, and that was part of the, you know, emotions, healing, transformation. That was the prompt. And yeah, that happened for sure. The end was sweet, but it was far-fetched. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, it was pretty far-fetched, something that happened in the end. But it was sweet to give it a nice, happy ending. There is part of the book in modern day where they take a trip to Alaska, and I did like that part. I liked the when they talked about the towns and some of the references. I lived in Alaska for a couple years, so I appreciated like hearing, oh, they went to Sitka, they went to, you know, to this famous location or that, and the totem poles and what those represent. That was cool. But that wasn't that big of a part of the story. So overall, I give this a 4.25, which is kind of low for Kristen Hanna, but I brought it down due to the ending being unrealistic. Otherwise, I would have gave it a 4.5 star. Okay, so the overall quality of writing, 4.75, and plot, 4.5. Strength of characters, I didn't write that down, but I would say 4.5, and then overall 4.25. So I did enjoy that. Kristen Hanna is one of my all-time favorite authors. She's an auto-buy author for me, and I do eventually want to read Her to Zero, but she has quite the catalog. I have a friend that actually has read Her to Zero. And well, this was the only book that she DNF'd. So she said she might go back and try it with the audio now. But it's interesting because she got to do a meet and greet. Well, no, it was like a virtual meet and greet with Kristen Hanna. And she told Kristen Hanna, this is the only book of yours that I haven't finished. And Kristen Hanna said, well, that's interesting because I always do a lot of research in my books where I go visit the location as part of my research. And she said, this is the only book that I did not go to Russia as part of my research. So maybe that came through a little bit more and made it just a little bit less real of an atmosphere as like Vietnam or Alaska or France, you know, the Dust Bowl, some of the places in her other stories. I thought that was kind of interesting, but yeah, this was a good book. I highly recommend it. And that is Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. You might cry, as with most of her books. I didn't, but it is a tearjerker. Okay, moving on. After that, I needed something a little spooky, and I needed to get my fix for Darcy Coates. I was fiending for a Darcy Coates book, and I did The Haunting of Ashburn House. So this book I was considering doing for Yellow Book Road, where I did Fairy Tale, which is a book with an animal character. Because I'd really been wanting to read a Darcy Coates book lately. If you watched my April Hall video, I'm kind of in my Darcy Coates era right now. And just really been loving her books. And so this one, I Googled, like, are there any Darcy Coates books with an animal character in it? And this one, there is a side character. She has a cat in this book named Wolfgang. And so I was going to do this for the animal one. I decided to do Fairy Tale because it had Radar was like more of a main character, it seemed like it would be. But this book I still read and I really enjoyed it. So this is, I would call it cozy horror. I always say this about Darcy Coates, but her books they're scary, but they're so well written and they don't have a lot of very little, if any, swearing in it. Vulgarity, sexual situations. You're not going to find that, but you're going to have like legitimate scary scenes. Maybe body gore, maybe paranormal, maybe some jump scares. But yeah, she can do all that without having to use some of those other things. And so I love that about her. She's so talented. I read this book from April 23rd to April 23rd. I finished this one also in one day. And this is published by Poison Pen, same publisher as Frida McFadden now. And when year published, it said 2016 and 2019. So maybe it was published a second time under Poison Pen in 2019. But I got this used. I think I paid about $8 for it used. And then Audible was having a big sale on the beginning of April. And all the Darcy Coates books were like less than $3. So I pretty much got all of them. And then I ended up getting Hoopla, where now I can check them out. But anyway, I paid less than $3 for this on Audible. The only book that I don't, well, she probably has more than one that's not on audio, but the only book that I noticed that I own that she doesn't have in audio is Parasite. So at some point I'm going to read that and just like do it without the audio. I haven't been able to find audio anywhere. If you guys know, let me know. But I am getting off track here. So this is like a haunted house book. The main character or subject is a young gal named Adrienne and her cat Wolfgang. A lot of Darcy Coates books don't have a lot of characters in them. They're more isolated. Our main character is like in an isolated setting, and there might be some, you know, secondary characters, but we don't have a lot of main characters. At least in the books that I've read. This was my 7th Darcy Coates book, and I read one more after this, which is technically going to be in my May wrap up. But that was kind of a theme I noticed. So this book, yeah, this gal, Adrienne, she inherits this Ashburn house. And she's kind of poor, down, I don't want to say down on her luck, but she is not doing great financially. So she's like, this is like great. This is a blessing. I'm going to move into this house with my cat. It's out in the middle of nowhere, outside of this small town. She doesn't have any kind of like connection to the outside world, service or anything like that. She doesn't even have a vehicle. And pretty soon, in true fashion of haunted houses, things start to go on the creepy side. Strange messages are etched into the walls. Furniture moves when she leaves the room, and a grave hidden in the depths of the forest hints at a terrible, unforgivable secret. Something twisted lives in her house, its hungry eyes ever watchful. So, she's trying to figure out what's going on in the house, and also some history of her aunt that left the house to her, because she was known in the town as being like very like kind of cold, standoffish older lady. And she starts doing some research into her family and stuff and trying to make sense of that and tie it in with what's going on in the house. And yeah, it was really fun. 329 pages, 9 hours. Okay, so Darcy Coates, one thing I've noticed in her books is there are a few words that she uses repeatedly. And so I took tallies on this one. And the words that she uses repeatedly are cacophony, wraith, and deluge. Deluge, which is like a really heavy downpour, that didn't happen in this book. So that was 0 count. But she used the word cacophony 4 times and wraith twice. Yeah, again, no vulgarity, but there was some body horror. And she's an Australian author, so some of the words were like meters, bonnet, mobile, hospital instead of the hospital, pub, torch for flashlight, some of that kind of stuff that you do notice. And I actually think that's really fun. I enjoy that in books. One part at the end I felt like was a little bit too convenient and it was confusing, and I actually had to Google it because I was like, what? And yeah, I think she was just trying to tie things together, but it confused me. But anyway, at the very end of it, it did wrap up. It was a cozy, happy ending. I thought it was fun, and I loved Wolfgang the cat. Yeah, he was a cool cat. Overall, I give this 4.0, probably a little bit lower of a rating because of that one part that I had to Google and I was like, what? But 3.75 for quality writing because of that. Strength of characters 4, plot 4. So, yeah, I love me some Darcy. Like I said, I read one other book since then, and I plan on reading at least a couple this month. Hopefully all her books at some point. I just got a bunch more. Darcy Coates, The Haunting of Ashburn House. Okay, let's try to move along here. I have 4 more books to talk about. So the next one, I'm not going to be able to probably say a lot about this because it is a shorter story and I want it to be spoiler free. I only have, I did this on audio as well as ebook on my Kindle, and that is Hostile Architecture by Joseph Moraine. I read this for one day, 4/24. This just came out on February 24th, 2026, and I actually did pre-order it. because the author is friends with Lauren and Ben Young from Young's and the Restless, and they were talking about it on their channel and how you could pre-order it. And I was like, that actually sounds pretty cool. I'm going to pre-order it. And I'm glad I did. So this is like an indie horror book. I paid about $5 each for the book and the audio. It wasn't bad. Kindle is where I got it, as well as Audible. So the main character is a guy named Ben, and past Ben and present Ben. And it's about 110 pages, or about 3 hours on audio. It is a novella. So the word hostile architecture in real life, that phrase is like when benches and stuff are designed to keep the homeless from sleeping on them, stuff like that, like intentionally designed to keep people from loitering or sleeping on those locations. And it's kind of messed up. So that's where the book draws its name from. This is about a guy named Ben, and he is homeless. He wasn't always like that. He used to have a family and everything, but yeah, he's homeless now and just living his life. He had some addiction struggles, and one day this strange man comes into his encampment and basically makes promises to other inhabitants of the camp, and I can give you a better life, all this. And so his friend Connor, I think is his name, goes with this guy, and he never returns. And then Ben, this guy's just weird and creepy. Like, he comes up in like a trench coat and stuff, and Ben, he doesn't belong there. Ben starts to notice other people that he knows, other unhoused people are disappearing. People that he knew from like the soup kitchen and stuff, they're starting to disappear, and something's not right. So Ben decides he's going to follow this guy. And that's when things get really crazy, when he gets pulled into this guy's world. I don't want to give away too much, but you're taken to another dimension, I guess, and really like some creepy, scary kind of stuff happening. And Ben's also, then he'll be like in present time, or he'll be like flashbacks to his past and how he screwed things up with his family and stuff like that. And so he's a flawed character, but you also like, he's a really likable character and you feel for him and stuff. And anyway, this did have a decent amount of body horror. It also used the word cacophony a few times. And I did like the ending. It wasn't really necessarily a happy ending, but it was thought-provoking. And so that was cool, that it's a horror novella, but it is leaving you thinking at the end. And at the end of the book, he has a little author's note of why he wrote the story, and how I think he was on path to write a different story, and he just felt called to write this story. And that was kind of cool to hear the author's perspective on that at the end. So I usually don't read a lot of short stories or novellas. I don't. But this, it was pretty good. I gave it 3.75 overall. And I think part of that is just because of the length. It's really hard to have like a 5-star novella, in my opinion. That's just me. The quality of the writing was 3.5, strength of characters 3.5, plot 3.75. Maybe closer to 4, but I did give it a 3.75 overall. So that's Hostile Architecture, and I would recommend that book. The next book that I have to talk about is Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. I started this on April 24th, and I finished it on April 27th. So this was published by William Morrow in 2007. It is a horror book. And this was Joe Hill's debut novel. And I think it won... Did it win the Bram Stoker Award? Or maybe it was a nominee. Anyway, I paid $5 for this as a new book at my used and new bookstore. And it was free to listen to through my library, Libby and Hoopla. Hoopla, for some reason, didn't have chapter breaks, but Libby did. So I went that route. The main characters are Judas Coin and a haunted object trope. So that's cool. There's 435 pages, 11 hours on audio. And if you don't know, Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, and he's written several horror novels. This was my second read from him. My first one was Nos 4A2, which I did like better, but I will be reading more of his stuff. I did enjoy this book. So this is about, there's a guy named Judas Coin. He was like kind of a death metal rock star back in the day. Now he like is pretty much retired, but he likes to collect creepy things. So a cookbook for cannibals, a used hangman's noose, that kind of stuff. And one day he receives an offer to purchase a box that has a ghost in it, a ghost for sale. Someone's selling a ghost. So he's like, oh, that's cool. I can't turn that down. So he gets it, and it's like a suit, like a, dress suit that a man would wear in this box. And it turns out it is a ghost, and this ghost has a connection to him. And this ghost has a vendetta with him. Something in his past that this ghost has arranged it for him to, upon his death, go haunt Judas Coin. So now he has to deal with that. Let's see here. I did read this as part of a reading sprint. So follow the Yellow Book Road towards the end. Youngs and the Restless did a reading sprint, like a live reading sprint, and there was a couple of other YouTubers that were part of the Yellow Book Road challenge that were on there, and that was a lot of fun. And so, there was a chat going on, but there was also like we would read for like 20-minute chunks and stuff. So that was cool. I got, I don't know, 50 pages or so read. I don't remember exactly, but that was fun. Hadn't done anything like that before. And when there was a part where I was sitting there in my reading sprint here, just like deep in thought, and someone rang my doorbell, and I like literally jumped. Like, it scared me because there are some legitimately creepy stuff in this book. The main character, I didn't find him to be the most likable for me, but he did have a couple dogs that I really liked. And I always like worry anytime that there's an animal in a story. I'm more worried about what's going to happen to the animal. And I'm not going to say anything about that, but yeah, he did have a couple of dogs in here and a girlfriend. The dogs were kind of referenced as familiars, which are like they're protectors from evil. So they helped to protect him and his girlfriend from the evil spirit. There were several references to metal music. His dogs' names were AC/DC related names. And then, of course, there's other references, but the book's called Heart-Shaped Box. So that Nirvana song, what is the song called? But the part where he says, I've been stuck in your heart-shaped box for weeks, that part was like in my head the whole time I was reading this book. So I gave this a 3.75 overall. I gave it a 4.0 for quality of writing, and especially for his debut novel. 3.5 for strength of characters, and plot story 3.75. I did really like this book. Like I said, I liked Nos 4A2 better, but it was pretty enjoyable and legitimately scary at times. And I think the next book of his I'm going to read is A Fireman. So anyway, Heart-Shaped Box. I would recommend that if you're looking for like a haunted object ghost story type book. The next book we have to talk about was my favorite book of the month. I love this book. I consumed it in less than 12 hours, and that is Hairpin Bridge by Taylor Adams. I actually did a short video after I read this because I was so hyped up about it. If you want to check that out. This was a great book. I don't hear it get a lot of hype. In fact, I think it's like 3.5 stars on Goodreads, but I don't know why. I don't know why it's not higher. It is such a good book. It's right up there with His other book, one of my favorite, can't point over there. One of my favorite thriller books, if not my favorite thriller book of all time, is No Exit by Taylor Adams, and this was right up there with that. Less than 12 hours on the 27th of April. Published by William Morrow in 2021. And this is a survival thriller. One of my favorite types of books is survival thrillers, which I like when they take place specifically like a really isolated setting, like in the wilderness. And that's what was happening in here. I got this. So after I read No Exit in April 2024, I was really hyped up about Taylor Adams. So I went and got this on Amazon like 2 years ago for about $14. And it sat here. It's probably one of my oldest TBR books. But I didn't have access to the audio until recently. And so I did get it on audio, and I don't know why I waited. I should have just read it, just the hard copy, because it was so good. I was missing out the last couple of years. But this is 304 pages or 10 hours audio, and I did do about 90% of it on audio. I will say that. This book is about, so this girl, there's these twin girls, and one of them is kind of a Rolling Stone, free-spirited, driving across the country, living out of her car at times kind of stuff. And she ends up in Montana. This book takes place at primarily at Hairpin Bridge, which is a fictional bridge location right outside of Missoula, Montana, which is a real town. And that is actually my hometown. And so I think that, kind of made the book even more fun for me, because there's not a lot of books that have my hometown in them. But this one did, and referenced it several times. And so that was fun for me. The county that this takes place in, the bridge, the diner, that stuff is fictional, but the town that it's 70 miles outside of is a very real town. So this takes place at Hairpin Bridge, about 70 miles outside of Missoula, Montana. This girl, she is out in the woods in her car, and she... Okay, I don't want to give away too much. Supposedly jumps off this bridge and commits suicide, supposedly. But her twin sister doesn't believe that, because like an hour before she supposedly committed suicide, she was pulled over by this cop. And then after she was pulled over by the cop, she tried to make 16 different calls to 911, but she didn't get a signal. And then she supposedly unalived herself. There's just some stuff that isn't adding up. So her sister goes to investigate, and she kind of does this like true crime blog anyway. And so she's kind of going to incorporate that, and she goes to interview the officer who was the last person to see her sister alive. And she meets him at the bridge to interview him. And that is when things just take off from there, and they just get crazy. And you would think, like, how thrilling can something be that pretty much all takes place in the same location, whether it's her or her sister? But it was really thrilling. I mean, Taylor Adams, he knows how to throw it at you, like just all these unexpected twists. It wasn't like too twisty, but it was definitely very twisty. Yeah, it was crazy. I love this book so much. It was so much fun, so entertaining. I could not put it down. I couldn't put down my earbuds. I went to a softball game, and I left my earbuds at home. So I went home and got my earbuds and brought them back and listened to it during the game, because I was obsessed. It was so good. This is my fourth Taylor Adams novel. I read also No Exit, Her Last Breath, which is newest release. That just came out a couple months ago, earlier this year. I did do a review on that. I really liked it. And The Last Word. I read that about a year ago and reviewed it, and that one was my least favorite of his. So I would say, in order of my favorite to least favorite of his, probably still No Exit, and then Hairpin Bridge, and then Her Last Breath, which is like a claustrophobic cave setting, and then The Last Word. So I have 2 more books of his to read to zero, and I definitely want to do that. Our Last Night in Earshot are his other ones that I feel like are not as well known. Anyway, this was super intense. And I liked how, so all his books that I've read so far have had female protagonists, like strong female protagonists, and I really did like that. I think he does a really good job of writing from a female first person perspective. There was a dual storyline with the twin sisters 3 months ago and present, and that did get a little confusing at times, especially on audio. But if you read it in the book, it's like different fonts when it's the different sisters. So I think that would have helped with the confusion if I had primarily read the book instead of doing primarily audio. But yeah, this was great. Overall, I gave this a 5-star rating. 5.0. This was so good. Quality of writing 4.75. I think because of that little bit of confusion there. Strength of characters 5. Plot story 5. I really did like the ending. I liked everything about this book. I really liked everything about this book, if you can't tell. So highly, highly, highly recommend Hairpin Bridge. I don't know why I don't hear more people talking about this. It's such a good book. And it's not that old, 2021. Yeah. Do yourself a favor and go read this. And go read No Exit if you haven't. I was raving about this to my friend, and she read it, and she like felt the same way. She was like, whoa, this is really intense. I'm like, yeah, I know. I love it. I love when books just put me on the edge of my seat, raise my heart rate. Okay, quickly, we are going to talk about the last book that I consumed in April, finished in April, I should say. That was the 50th book of 2026 for me, and I only did the audio. And this was A House at the Bottom of a Lake by Josh Malerman, and it is like a novella. Started it on the 28th, finished it on the 28th. I was getting ready to go to a lake for vacation, and so I listened to this. I wanted to do like lake themed books. Listen to this, and then I also read Darcy Coates' Dead Lake, which I finished in May, so I'll talk about that next month. But wanted something with lake vibes, and this is a horror novella published in 2021, and it was free through my Libby Audio. The physical copy is 208 pages. That's what my notes say. That's not really a novella. It felt like a novella. It was 4 hours on audio 1.0. So anyway, this was my first Josh Malerman book. I do want to read more of his. I want to read Bird Box, even though I watched the movie. This was not my favorite. I'm sorry. But it was, I think a lot of it was because of the length. And like I said earlier, it's really hard for me to get into novellas, and with you can't have as much detail and stuff in a novella. But yeah, if you guys do watch Youngs and the Restless, this is Josh Malerman is like Ben's professional role model as a horror writer. And he does have a lot of books out there. So this one, I don't think it's like his typical horror book. This wasn't even horror, I would say. I would say this is more like, I don't know, fantastical realism, fantasy. I don't know. It's about these 2 kids who are like 17 or something. They're dating. They go on a date on a lake on his uncle's canoe, and they find like a little canal or tunnel, or I think it's a tunnel that comes out in another lake. So they go to this second lake. Down below in the lake, there is a house at the bottom of the lake, like the title implies. And so they decide they're going to go explore it, and they rent some scuba gear, get acclimated to that, all that, and they go down, and it is creepy. It's also kind of beautiful, but it's weird because everything is just like stationary, like you would expect stuff to be floating around, but like the tables are on the ground and the candlesticks are on the table, stuff like that. And so they make a promise to each other that they're not gonna like question anything and they're not gonna tell anyone. And they're exploring it as they're like falling in love. It's kind of a coming of age, first love type book. You do have the two narrators, the male and the female narrator. There was some stuff that I didn't. There was one scene that I thought was silly. It did not add any value to the story. It didn't need to be there. It was actually kind of off-putting, and that probably affected my rating. It could have done without that. But the other thing was it had an ambiguous ending, and I don't know if that was the point. And like I said, it was a short book, so it couldn't, there wasn't a lot of room for expansion, but maybe he could have made this like a bigger book and full-length novel and expanded on it and stuff, because I thought the ending was kind of, I don't know, a little rushed and kind of ambiguous. I find usually with endings that are like left up to the reader to decide, but this one I did have some questions at the end. It felt a little bit like underwhelming and left me with some questions. I still want to read a full-length novel by him for sure. Like I said, Bird Box, but he's got a lot of other books out there. So I guess if you guys have any good Josh Malerman recommendations aside from Bird Box, or I think that one has like a sequel or prequel, let me know. Maybe I could read the prequel. I saw the movie a few years ago, and had I known it was a book, I wouldn't have watched the movie till I read the book. So anyway, any good recommendations from him, let me know. I know he's a pretty established horror author. I see a lot of his books in my local used bookstore. This was a quick, easy listen. I gave it 2.75. And again, you know, I talked about some of the factors why. Otherwise, maybe I would have given it a higher rating because I liked his writing. But yeah, there was just some stuff that was like, I don't know. Quality writing, 2.75. And the plot, 2.75. Strength of characters, I don't know. I didn't put that. Maybe 2.5. But yeah, 2.75 overall. So that was the last book that I read in April. I did have a couple books that I started in April, but then we went on vacation to the lake and I was like busy doing stuff. And so I didn't finish those ones until May. So now we're in May and I've already, today's what, the 6th? And I've already read like 4 books this month. So on track for a good month in May, but April was a good reading month. I really, really, really enjoyed Hairpin Bridge. That was my favorite, but I had some other good reads in there too and a nice variety, and I thought that reading challenge was really fun. Now they are doing a reading challenge in May that I'm going to be participating in called Read for the Roses, but it's the Youngs and the Restless are doing it. It's much not much smaller because there's 4 books that you have to read for like a bingo, but you get a free spot. So three categories. So I will be participating in that. So watch for me talking about those prompts in my next video. As far as next videos go, if I read a lot of books in May, I might try to break it up because here we are at an hour and 20 minutes and I'm still yabbing. So I might try to break it up like I did in March and do like a mid-month wrap up, end of month wrap up. And then also I'm going to maybe do a video of a tour of my bookshelves once I get all my Darcy books organized on here. And I am planning on reading my last Noelle Eiley book. And so I'm going to do a ranking of all of her currently published books, hopefully this month. She's got a new one coming out in July, so I want to get it done before then. Anyway, thank you so much if you're still here. I really appreciate it. Let me know what books you read in April, if you've read any of these, what your thoughts are, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye, guys.